My wife's family tried to cut me out of millions. They forgot one crucial detail. I, 35M, come from a simple background. My parents live in a quiet suburb and I grew up in a small 3-bedroom house that always smelled like fresh laundry and home-cooked meals. After high school, I took a series of odd jobs, bartending, helping at my uncle's hardware store, eventually managing a local sporting goods shop. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. My wife, on the other hand, came from a world I'd never experienced. Her parents owned multiple properties, drove fancy cars, and hosted large, ostentatious parties a few times a year. Let's call them my father-in-law FL and mother-in-law MIL. FL was a tall, imposing figure, socially and physically exuding a quiet dominance in any room. He'd make casual remarks that were more like veiled threats or manipulations. MIL was similarly skilled. That subtle disapproval, just one raised eyebrow, could make people shrink. They were never overtly cruel in front of me, but I felt their disapproval lurking beneath polite conversation. After my wife and I got engaged, I realized how much her parents feared outsiders nabbing their family assets. They looked at me like an intruder, despite the fact that my wife and I had been dating for years. Before we could even set a wedding date, FL demanded I sign a prenuptial agreement. I didn't have the finances to fight it legally and I was too blinded by love. I kept telling myself it was just a symbolic thing to appease her parents. Love was all the guarantee I needed, right? The day I signed remains vivid in my mind. It was a warm afternoon at her parents' massive home. MIL laid out the document and slid a pen my way. FL offered me coffee almost like it was a normal business transaction. My wife stood off to the side, saying little. That hurt, but I shrugged it off, figuring it wouldn't matter in the long run. The contract basically said that any gifts, inheritances, or trust funds belonging to her family remained her separate property, while any major asset we acquired jointly, like a house or lottery winnings, would be marital property. I found that odd, but again, I just wanted to marry her. 6 months later, we married by a lake in a picturesque ceremony. My parents were overwhelmed by the extravagance but supportive. I recall tension on my father's face when he greeted my in-laws. He'd always told me to trust my gut, but I thought love would conquer all doubts. The first couple of years went by without major incident. We lived in a condo her parents helped us secure. I paid monthly toward the mortgage, though the down payment had come from her father's gift. Looking back, it was never truly a gift, more like a tool for controlling us. But back then, I assumed this was just how wealthy families operated. Our marriage had the usual money squabbles and occasional blowouts about our parents intruding on our decisions. They'd show up unannounced, bring new furniture or decor, and occasionally reorder our entire living space without warning. My wife would brush off my frustration, labeling it her parents' helpful nature. Then came the day that turned everything upside down. My wife called me, breathless with excitement, saying she'd won a $9 million lottery jackpot from a random ticket she bought at a gas station. At first, I was elated, dreaming of quitting our jobs, traveling the world, starting fresh. But the joy dimmed quickly. She insisted we keep it secret even from my parents. She became oddly paranoid, talking about claiming the money properly and meeting with lawyers I'd never met. When I asked to join these meetings, she said I'd feel out of place, which stung. I had no clue the real bombshell was yet to come. One afternoon, I came home from work, exhausted, to find her there with her aunt rummaging through drawers. She dropped the news as if it were casual. She was filing for divorce. She told me to pack my bags and leave the condo, an arrangement she claimed was under her name. I was floored. Sure, I had contributed monthly mortgage payments, but apparently she believed her father's initial down payment and her new fortune made me irrelevant. I felt my heart splinter. I called my father, voice shaking, telling him I'd just been kicked out of my own home. It was the ultimate betrayal, but the biggest shock came next. I discovered that my father-in-law had sent his personal attorney to shield her. They wanted me out so they could isolate the lottery winnings from me, except they'd forgotten the terms of the very prenup they had forced on me. Instead of shielding their daughter entirely, it said that any windfall acquired during marriage counted as a joint asset. Suddenly, I realized that if they insisted on divorcing me right after the jackpot, they might not get to keep it all. I decided to handle things carefully. My father urged me to stay calm, get a lawyer outside their social circle, and brace for a nasty fight. And I was determined not to fold. They had thrown down the gauntlet, pushing me around like an expendable nuisance. If they thought I would quietly walk away, they had severely underestimated me. I spent a few nights at my parents' place trying to absorb the shock. My mother was livid, ranting that my in-laws had been disrespectful from day one. My father, while equally angry, stayed pragmatic. He contacted an old friend, a family law attorney, and got me an appointment first thing in the morning. Sitting in that attorney's office, I felt a swirl of anger and relief. I told him everything, how the in-laws insisted on the prenup, how my wife had just won $9 million, and how she blindsided me with divorce. When he looked over the prenup, he actually chuckled. They shot themselves in the foot, he said. They had specifically included language that lumped lottery winnings under marital assets. Unless a judge pulled some wild legal interpretation, I was entitled to a substantial portion. Hearing this was like a lifeline. I had been so worried the prenup would lock me out, but it turned out their paranoia over protecting inherited wealth had overshadowed the possibility of a lottery scenario. My lawyer warned me it wouldn't be easy. My in-laws were wealthy, well-connected, and likely to deploy an entire legal team. But he believed we had a strong case, especially since I had contributed financially to the marriage and been abruptly expelled from our jointly occupied home. I asked about the divorce process in our state. A contested divorce could easily stretch for months or longer, but if my wife's side realized they were on shaky ground, they might seek a fast settlement. The lawyer predicted they'd try intimidation or underhanded tactics to get me to sign away my rights cheaply. Sure enough, my father-in-law left me a menacing voicemail within days. Back off. You don't deserve anything from my daughter. If you try to pursue the lottery winnings, I'll make sure you end up with nothing. My lawyer just advised me to document everything. Then my mother-in-law cornered me outside my parents' home. She offered a pitiful, vanish quietly deal, presenting it as a generous settlement which was so low it wouldn't even cover half the mortgage contributions I'd made. I refused, saying we'd see each other in court. She scoffed, baffled by my defiance, clearly unaccustomed to anyone rejecting her money. With negotiations at a standstill, my lawyer filed motions to secure the lottery funds from being hidden or transferred. That enraged my in-laws. They started spinning tales about me being a gold digger who preyed on their innocent daughter. It stung, but I stood firm. My boss, who owned the sporting goods shop, had my back, brushing off my father-in-law's attempts to meddle in my employment. Friends took sides, some calling me petty, others applauding me for fighting back. The tension was suffocating, but I refused to cave. After a couple of weeks of fruitless negotiation, we got a court date. My wife was nowhere to be found personally. She was practically under her parents' protective wing, ignoring all direct communication with me. She had her lawyers do the talking, claiming I was the leech who contributed nothing to the marriage. My lawyer pushed back hard with financial records, timeshares of bills, and the explicit prenup clause about windfalls. We also highlighted how I had been violently shut out of the condo. The judge ordered both sides to prepare for a more formal hearing on asset division. In one last attempt at intimidation, my father-in-law threatened my boss again, who promptly told him to get lost. That only fueled my father-in-law's anger further. My lawyer said we needed to proceed carefully but remained confident the judge would see through their scare tactics. Nothing, however, could have prepared me for the final showdown in court. But at least the law was, ironically, on my side, thanks to the very prenup they had forced on me. Weeks passed, and the tension around the upcoming hearing reached a fever pitch. My wife still avoided direct contact with me, yet her lawyers bombarded mine with motions. They insisted the lottery win was separate property because she had purchased the ticket, conveniently ignoring the prenup language that any major windfall during the marriage was marital. Meanwhile, my father-in-law tried to smear my reputation among friends and business contacts, peddling the narrative that I was a gold digger who had married into the family solely for money. During this period, I felt a swirl of frustration and motivation. If they believed they could bully me out of my rights, they were gravely mistaken. I had documents showing how I contributed to our shared life, utility bills, groceries, partial mortgage payments. My attorney and I pored over every detail of the prenup. He pointed out a critical sentence: all financial windfalls, including but not limited to lottery or game show winnings, shall be considered marital assets unless expressly designated otherwise. It was like my in-laws had left a back door open without realizing it. A week before the hearing, we had a preliminary status conference. My wife arrived with her parents and a posse of lawyers, 4 attorneys plus a financial advisor. They looked at me with that same air of superiority, but their expressions faltered when my lawyer calmly produced the prenup text, highlighting the exact clause about lottery proceeds. The judge listened quietly, seemed unimpressed by their attempts to dismiss it, and ordered that all substantial assets remain frozen until the main hearing. That same afternoon, my mother-in-law cornered me outside the courthouse. She insisted we should talk like adults. She tried offering a lump sum, even lower than before, labeling it generous for someone of my background. I refused again, telling her we'd let the judge decide. She snapped that I was destroying the family, as if I had been the one who blindsided her daughter with divorce. The hypocrisy made my blood boil, but I kept my cool. My lawyer had warned me not to engage in heated exchanges that could be twisted against me. Later, behind the scenes, I grew worried my in-laws might try to stash the lottery winnings in secret accounts. My lawyer, anticipating that possibility, requested court orders preventing any large transfers. We also arranged to have a forensic accountant on standby, ready to jump in if we suspected any hidden funds. My father-in-law's anger flared. He left me a voicemail, accusing me of draining the love out of his daughter's life. It was rich, considering they were the ones who threw me out right after hitting the jackpot. As the hearing approached, I prepared meticulously with my attorney. We rehearsed my statement, ensuring I'd appear calm and factual in court. I gathered copies of the prenup, receipts for the mortgage I'd partially funded, and even text messages showing my wife acknowledging our joint bills. My lawyer recommended I keep my answers concise and let the evidence speak for itself. If they tried emotional theatrics, we'd counter with cold, hard documentation. On the morning of the hearing, I stood in front of the courthouse, heart pounding. My parents accompanied me for moral support, though they waited outside the courtroom once proceedings began. Stepping in, I saw my wife seated beside her father, both wearing stone-cold expressions. Her mother lingered at the back, arms folded tightly across her chest. Their lawyers, polished and confident, probably believed money and legal muscle could outmatch the facts. The judge, a stern woman in her 50s, wasted no time. She invited each side to present their arguments. My wife's lead attorney tried framing me as a minor contributor, someone who had done little more than occupy the same living space. They argued the lottery ticket was her personal transaction, bought with her own money. But my lawyer calmly pointed out how the prenup explicitly lumped such windfalls into marital property. And then we dropped the bombshell. Bank records showing she had used our joint account card that day. When we introduced that evidence, I saw a visible tension ripple through my father-in-law's camp. The judge asked if they had any contrary documentation proving it was solely her personal funds. They fumbled, claiming the card was accidentally used or that it was her father's deposit in the account. But the statements clearly showed both our names, not hers alone. The judge took note, her gaze shifting to them expectantly. Finally, my wife spoke. She claimed she never wanted to hurt me, that her parents had pushed for divorce once the jackpot arrived to protect family assets. She stumbled over her words, admitting she felt pressured, but also tried to justify it by saying everyone would have come after us if they knew about the money. My lawyer asked if she had consulted me before making these decisions. She admitted she had not. The judge's disapproval became palpable. By midday, it was clear. The prenuptial agreement was a double-edged sword for them. The very document they'd used to isolate their wealth now threatened to place a massive chunk of the lottery winnings in my hands. The judge scheduled a subsequent hearing for final decisions, stating she was inclined to treat the lottery as a major marital asset subject to equitable distribution. Outside the courthouse, my father-in-law brushed past me, muttering, "This is far from over," but his confidence was definitely cracked. In the weeks leading up to the final ruling, their desperation escalated. My father-in-law's lawyers tried everything, filing motions to reconsider the prenup's wording, claiming the intent hadn't been to include lottery proceeds. The judge denied every motion, pointing to the plain, unambiguous language. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law tried cornering me again, warning that I'd regret it if I broke their family apart. I told her point blank. They started this the moment they blindsided me with divorce and kicked me out. My wife later tried reaching out, leaving emotional voicemails, saying she didn't want things to end so bitterly, that if we could just come to a private arrangement, maybe we could salvage some part of our relationship. Maybe, once upon a time, I would have considered it. But after the intimidation, the lies, and the forced eviction, my trust was gone. My lawyer advised me not to engage in any backchannel talks. We had a strong legal position, no reason to settle for crumbs. Finally, the day of the final hearing arrived. The courtroom was packed. Attorneys for both sides. My father, my mother, and a few close friends seated quietly in the back for support. The judge took the bench, reviewed the updated filings, and allowed final statements. My father-in-law's lead lawyer made one last desperate gamble, painting me as some cunning opportunist who had only discovered the prenup's loophole after benefiting from the family's so-called generosity. My lawyer countered with cold, straightforward facts. 1. They forced me to sign the prenup. 2. It explicitly included lottery winnings as marital property. 3. While my father-in-law financed part of the condo, I contributed monthly, making it not a purely separate asset. And 4. The timing of the divorce filing immediately after the jackpot was textbook evidence of their attempt to isolate the winnings. The judge listened patiently, then delivered her ruling. She declared that the lottery winnings clearly fell under marital assets per the prenuptial agreement's language. She criticized my in-laws for attempting to twist the very document they had drafted. She also found my wife's immediate eviction of me from the condo unreasonable, ruling that I was entitled to reimbursement for my share of the mortgage and other marital contributions. In short, the judge ordered that I would receive a substantial percentage of the lottery payout plus reimbursement for my financial contributions to the condo. We parted ways with a finalization date set a few weeks later just to process the paperwork. My father-in-law's face was thunderous. My mother-in-law stood beside him, whispering furiously. And my wife stood there with tears in her eyes, whether from genuine regret or anger at losing so much money, I couldn't tell. I felt a swirl of emotions, vindication, sadness, and an aching sense of finality. We once loved each other, but greed, manipulation, and parental interference shattered it all. In the aftermath, their lawyers attempted one last Hail Mary, proposing a slightly modified settlement, likely hoping I would accept a smaller sum to avoid more drama. My lawyer advised against it. We had no reason to settle for less. The only concession I made was giving up any interest in the condo, a place I never wanted to step foot in again. They cut me a check for an impressive sum. Was it half the jackpot? No, but it was big enough to rebuild my life comfortably. Throughout it all, one truth became clear. In their arrogance, my in-laws believed wealth insulated them from consequences. They never expected me to fight back or to win. Ironically, the prenuptial agreement they once wielded as a sword became the very shield that secured my share of the winnings. Poetic justice, if ever there was. My wife, as far as I know, remains under her parents' wing. She's lost face in her social circle after the fiasco. Mutual acquaintances say she struggles with guilt, but I doubt she'll ever openly admit her family's role in orchestrating everything. I used part of my settlement to help my parents upgrade their home, a small way to repay their unwavering support. Another portion I invested wisely. Though the entire ordeal left me scarred, changing how I view trust, marriage, and money, I take comfort in knowing I stood my ground. I refused to be bullied into accepting table scraps. While the journey was excruciatingly painful, the final outcome felt like a triumph over tyranny. Now, free from my in-laws' manipulative grasp, I'm moving forward. I've returned to a simpler life, ironically one reminiscent of my pre-marriage days. But I'm stronger now. Wiser. Not at all the naive man they once thought they could steamroll. If they remember anything about me, let it be this: they started the war. I finished it.